Okay. Good evening to all of you. Just because just now my class got over 500 plus because it was last class, so it took a little bit more time than usual. Just 1 minute. Okay, so start hoga. It will be starting in January, first week of January. I will talk about that later. Already हम बहुत late हो गए हैं. So I'll start. Okay, so we have already studied demographic transition theory. As I said, a number of other things we'll talk about demographic transition theory. What is timing, you are asking? I don't understand. And we'll start with one question was there. कौन सा क्वेश्चन था? What was the question? Remind me. This class timing अभी I have not decided. I haven't seen even what was the poll result and all those. बाद में बात करेंगे उसके बारे में. Not now. Okay. It was several socio-economic views on population provided the prelude to development of demographic transition theory, and it was justified. So can I say I can start straightforward with the introduction, and I can say that demographic transition theory is the primary or I would say paradigmatic theory of demography today. However, its development could be seen as a gradual understanding of population and its related processes as it developed with several views presented by scholars. So this can be our introduction. Then I will come to the main body, and I would say various views of scholars like J.S. Mill, Arsène Dumont, Durkheim, Ricardo, etc. provided the necessary base for development of demographic transition theory. So first part यहाँ पर हम ये लिखेंगे, and we have already seen how we have to link the case of, for example, I'll talk about J.S. Mills. So when I'll talk about J.S. Mills, I will talk about how the idea of demographic regulation, which forms the base of DTT, was expressed by him. Yes or no? You will be able to link this, J.S. Mill. Similarly, I will explain how Arsène Dumont idea of fertility change due to ambitions of individuals is again ingrained in the DTT. Demographic transition theory में present है. So again you will be able to link that. We talked about the idea of Durkheim. So we'll talk about 3 principles थे, if you remember. The aspect of 3 principles, and the third principle was that along with the demographic transition, there is also what? The other socio-economic aspects of the society are also changing. So demographic, the idea that demographic processes are linked with other socio-cultural processes. You'll talk about this, you'll explain that, and then you'll also talk about the idea of Ricardo and how the relation between between market forces and population processes. So this is part and parcel of the fourth stage of demographic transition theory. So all these you will explain. So ये first part होगा हमारे आंसर का, which would be main body. Out of the total main body, around 70% of your answer should be written this. Then what you'll do, you'll also say that here, despite these early ideas which existed, it is important to note that demographic transition theory is an inductive model. Or theory. It is essentially what? It is an inductive model or theory which is based upon the empirical experiences of the developed countries. ठीक है. So very important aspect of demographic transition theory is what? It should be credited for number of things. First of all, what it did, it combined the existing views with the new insights which developed from this empirical, from these empirical studies. So it very beautifully what it does, it combines these existing views with the insights which developed from the empirical studies which were conducted of the Western world. And for example, what it does, it formulates all these into what? Into a macro theory, or into a, yes, you can say macro theory, और मैक्रो से बेटर है अम्ब्रेला. Concept of demographic transition, which includes so many things like the behavior of mortality, the behavior, if you talk about, of fertility. ठीक है. It includes the case of age structure of the population. It includes the socio-cultural changes, ठीक है, all of these, and it has not only included them but also improved upon the already existing views. For example, if I take the case of this socio-cultural changes का ही लेते हैं. So Durkheim, if you talk about, saw as what? Saw these changes as outcome of population growth. But can we say DTT here improves and finds more dialectic relationship between population growth and the socio-cultural changes. Which one is cause and which one is effect, it is difficult to define. Okay, for example, tell me, if for example, if, or we can say whether the economic or technological changes or improvements are result of population growth or are outcome of it, is very difficult or complex to identify. Very complex to identify. So what DTT does? DTT takes this complexity into account. ठीक है, into account. It treats society as what? Society as a system where parts are, or components are interlinked to each other in a two-way causative relationship. Okay, so it is not as much simplifying as it was done by Durkheim. Can you understand? Causative component तो उस theories में भी थे यार. All of them were giving cause. Is this point clear? Last point जब मैंने बात किया, tell me fast. ठीक है, so this is the beauty of the demographic transition theory. This is what the demographic transition theory has improved over the already existing view. So it has not only combined them, but also improved upon them with the new ideas which emerged with the empirical studies of the Western world history. ठीक है? So this is what you should have written. लास्ट में कंक्लूजन लिखना है. तो you simply write, Jitendra, again when it is recorded, see that recording. यार फिर से explain करने के लिए बोलोगे तो it is too much to explain. We are simply saying कि earlier views many times they were simplifying the process. DTT studies reality in its entire complexity. That is what we are simply saying. And I have little bit burns in my mouth, so I am finding it actually very difficult to speak. This is what I am saying. It treats society as a system. We have already studied about system analysis, where we have seen how components are interlinked to each other with a two-way relationship. It is inductive theory. It comes to a possibilistic conclusion, but it is an inductive theory. Okay. So, when we are talking about conclusion, we can say that DDT provides a comprehensive framework for understanding demographic processes. Full stop. However, it should be realized as also inherent in DTT that every society has its own peculiar history and geography. Thus, each society will have its own unique demographic transition. So this can be our conclusion and it would be enough. ठीक है. Now we'll write some more questions. उसको करते हैं. So actually I am going to write two questions here. Okay, that is also one question which is left. Okay, उसको भी कर लेते हैं पहले. Marx views on population is more humanistic. Comment. I think this was the question. Yes or no? Is more humanistic. Comment. Yes, it was the same question. 150 words. So again I'll give you 2 minutes. Think क्या लिखना है. You have got your 2 minutes. Think what you will be writing. Yes, that can be done. We'll see. अभी देखते हैं. So here the question says Marx's views on population is more humanistic. So I should know what is Marx's view. I should know what is humanism, where human becomes the central agency, which is not dictated by any external power, but is himself responsible for his activities. That is humanism. And more here means comparative. पहले भी बताया. Also it gives comment. I have before also told that comment gives me a little bit of liberty to agree with the statement, to disagree with the statement, or to partially agree with the statement. So can I say I will partially agree with the statement? And it is just 150 word answer. So I don't have the liberty here to write too much big introduction. ठीक है. So what at best I can do in the introduction, सबसे अच्छा introduction ये होगा, I would expand it. So Marx, it is Marx's views on population is है तो यहाँ पर views नहीं होगा. Marx's view on population is more humanistic than Malthus, but less than the demographic transition theory. Can we say that कि इस तरह से डायरेक्टली स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं? Yes or no? We can directly start this answer like this. Then I will come to the main body, and it is up to me. I write in paragraphs or I write in charts. मैं चार्ट में बना के दिखाता हूँ. You can even write in paragraphs. No problem in that. So Malthus, Marx, and demographic transition theory. So if we talk about Malthus, so Malthusian view on demographic or population processes. ठीक है. So Malthusian view on demographic or population processes. So what was Malthus' view? Malthus saw population growth and associated processes as more space dependent. And what he says, space dependent, he saw that the according to him, population growth always outpaces the subsistence growth, which leads to overpopulation and related problems. Overpopulation and related problems. On the other hand, if we compare it with Marx, what Marx saw? Marx saw population and related problems as time dependent. He saw root cause of overpopulation and related problems was the greed of capitalists. Greed of the capitalists. So, his view was that it is man-made, or it is human-made structural problem. Human-made structural problem. Okay? So, very clearly what happens here, it is human-made problem. And this problem was what? It was unique to capitalism. It was unique to capitalism. Can I say thus here it is an example of historical determinism. Historical determinism where, or economic determinism, where human is subordinated to capitalistic structure. Yes or no? Tell me. Human is subordinated to capitalistic structure. देखो, when I am writing, the numbers of words is becoming high, but you have to understand कि I am writing it to explain you. That is why I am writing so much about Malthus also. I will write so much about DDT also. But when in the exam you are writing, you will not make this chart. You will write it more in paragraph form. And there you will basically do what? You will write about that this was the view of Marx and thus it is humanistic, which is clearly more humanistic than Malthus, because Malthus saw it as more space dependent and here as we have written that it was inevitable. So it is clearly what? Deterministic or anti-humanistic. But then I'll write that despite this, in his view, capitalism is always associated with population problem. In other words, human is subordinated to capitalistic structure. ठीक है, और इसको मैं कंपेयर करूं, so we can say that thus it is less humanistic than demographic transition theory, which demographic transition theory sees what? It is based upon the theory of demographic regulation. What it says? Demographic regulation theory, that which believes that humans are able to take corrective steps and avoid a demographic catastrophe before it arrives, irrespective of structural settings. DTT is what? It is universal model. So whether you are in any type of setting, this is going to happen. Can you understand? So this is the first criteria on the basis of which I will write. Second criteria, solution for overpopulation. Solution for overpopulation. So what is the solution for overpopulation given in Malthus? He talks about he emphasizes on application of positive checks. Okay. So we have already seen that how he says that despite human beings doing everything, in no case the preventive checks would become so much effective that positive checks would not apply more or less in a regular fashion. Okay. So for him it is, here what happens, human is subordinated to nature or environment. If you talk about the case of demographic transition theory, Marx believes that solution is what? It is result of a social revolution which is led by people, which is humans, to overthrow capitalism and replace it by communism. So he saw that only communism can give, only communism can allow population to remain optimum for infinity. So tell me, can I say here again what we find? Human is subordinated to communist structure? Yes or no? Obviously, सीधी सी बात है, Here humanism is getting subordinated to the communist structure. Without communist structure, he won't be able to achieve the optimum and continue to remain in the optimum population scenario. So here again, it is although more humanistic than Malthus, but less humanistic than demographic transition theory. Because what DTT says that humans are able to bring decline in fertility levels through the process of socio-economic development. So it is the socio-economic development process which brings the fertility levels down and thus avoids the demographic catastrophe. And again, it is what? It is irrespective of the structural settings which are there. Everywhere it is happening. Okay? So very clearly we can conclude that Marx's idea is what? Humanistic, but not as much as demographic transition theory. Okay? So that is basically what you had to write. Now I'll come to the questions which I was going to write. Okay, so here are two questions. I'll give you 4 minutes or 3 minutes first to find out what is the difference between these two questions. Take your time and think what is the difference between these two questions. Okay. So tell me, can I say, you check yourself? When I was reading first question, I saw that rather than being one demographic transition, there are in reality many. Can I say that this question is mainly about the spatial variability in demographic transition? Yes or no? Tell me. अभी थोड़ी देर पहले हमने बात किया था. स्पेशल वेरिएबिलिटी, यस, अक्रॉस डिफरेंट रीजन्स. अभी हमने पीछे कंक्लूजन भी लिखा था रिलेटेड विद दैट. So it is more related with the spatial variability which exists in the demographic transition found across the world. And we'll see. Second question is more about that with demographic transition in reality is a set of transitions. In simple words, it means that demographic transition is an umbrella term which includes variety of transitions taking place in the society. Taking place in the society. Can you understand this? It is same idea that वो third point जो था हमारा, where it is linked with the other socio-economic changes occurring in the society. ठीक है? So can you understand these two? Okay, so if you have understood, now I'll give you 2 more minutes to first brainstorm on the first question. Think about what you will be writing in the first question. Question number 1. Do in your copies. Okay. How to differentiate? Chetna is asking how to differentiate between these two questions. Here it is saying that there is rather than being one demographic transition, in reality there are many. Tell me, in demographic transition theory, did we saw that there is one transition? Yes or no? Transition phase was one, or can we say that one transition was taking place? Although we, for purpose of understanding, we divided it into two phases. Yes or no? For the purpose of understanding, we divided it into two phases, phase 2 and 3. But in reality, there is one transition where we also wrote that that society transitions from high stationary stage to low stationary stage. Okay. So that gives me an idea that the first statement is more about the variety of transitions which are found on the earth surface. In the second question, it is demographic transition in reality is a set of transition. So here it is breaking demographic transition into parts. So from that we can just get an idea. Okay, फर्स्ट की बात करते हैं. So when I'm talking about the first one, can I say this can be the start? बाद में you ask these questions on a Telegram group, I'll tell you. Don't interrupt in between when we are doing something else. Okay, so here you can see it is important to note that at any point of time, can I say यहाँ से मैं start कर सकता था directly. At any point of time, different countries or areas of the world are at different stages of demographic transition. This is largely due to the dual nature of humans. Biologically, humans are same everywhere, involved in the process of reproduction, but culturally they differ. It is this cultural diversity that gives rise to variability and variations in demographic rates, resulting in different countries lying in, or resulting in, यहाँ पर थोड़ा सा words को change कर दोगे and you will say resulting in variability in the demographic transition process across the world. Can I say that? This would have been the first point. ठीक है. So from here basically I will be starting, and then I will talk about what this variability is about. So I'll say that this is the reason why. Can you see here? So once I have written that, I would say that this is the reason why the first world, first, second and third world countries had different experiences of demographic transition. Moreover, the experience of different countries within each group has also been found variable. Has also been found variable. ठीक है. So once I have written, then I will start writing about these. So first मैं लिखूँगा first, और according to the question you can do what, you can alter the content which you already have. So अगर मैं heading डाला होता तो I would have written uniqueness of demographic transition in the first world countries. Of the first world countries. So tell me, can I say the experience of first world countries fits perfectly with the conclusions of demographic transition theory? Yes or no? It is to be expected, as DTT is an inductive model based on experience of first world countries. ठीक है. And then I will explain what was the basic aspect of these countries, that in them okay. So if you talk about here, very important thing about them was that here this level, if you talk about, it was around 35 per thousand. It was around 35 per thousand. Other very important aspect was that in stage 2, decline in mortality was result of what? Result of economic and technological developments. It coincided with the industrial revolution. ठीक है. Very clearly what we find that stage 2 in these countries lasted for how much? 3 to 4 decades. So fertility decline started fertility decline started only after 3 to 4 decades as social development catched with economic development, caught up with the economic development. ठीक है. And if you talk about in almost all of these countries, what we find that the transition started somewhere in late 18th and early 19th century. Okay. So in almost all of them, what we find that transition started somewhere in the 18th century. And this transition, if you talk about this period, the completion of transition occurred between First World War and Second World War. So almost all the developed countries, by the end of Second World War, they had already reached in the fourth stage of demographic transition. Okay. So this is the unique feature of the developed world countries. Very important thing about the developed world countries was that they already had a sufficient, or we can say significant level of social development. So they already had a level of social development. Okay. And this was one of the reasons why this was this lasted to 3 to 4 decades, second stage. Despite this general thing, we find that here also there were several differences. For example, each country had its own unique demographic transition. For example, if you talk about Britain, if we talk about Britain, entered demographic transition at least 2 decades before USA, but completed it 1 decade after USA. So in USA, what was happening? Socio-economic development process was so fast. Most of the people were migrants, and these migrants, if you talk about, they already had a level of awareness, they already had a level of cultural development, education. So there it occurred. How? It occurred faster compared to UK. So this is the experience of the first world countries. If I talk about the second world countries, so very important thing of the second world countries was that they entered transition phase in between the World War periods. World War periods. So they entered in the transition when developed world, first world was already completing its transition. That was the time when they started their transition. ठीक है, अब यहां पर क्या था, so here if we talk about the second world countries, here also initially their death rate and birth rate was around 35 per thousand. So here they also had nearness to Western Europe. It meant that there was diffusion of development was taking place. So they also already had a certain level of development, comma, particularly social. Particularly social development was quite influenced by its nearness to Europe. That is the reason why here it was 35 per thousand. Like पहले केस में यहाँ पर भी सेम है, ठीक है. However, when we talk about the second stage, decline in mortality. So tell me, what was the cause of decline in mortality in the second world? Primary cause was the diffusion of medical health technology from Western Europe. Thus here what is unique thing? Thus here it was not result or outcome of economic and technological development. Economic and technological development. So पहला डिफरेंस समझ में आ गया. Then decline of fertility. Decline of fertility. So here what happened? Decline of fertility came faster than Western Europe or the first world. ठीक है, and that means second stage lasted only only 2 to 3 decades. There it was 3 to 4 decades. Here it lasted only 2 to 3 decades. And why it came faster? Because one, if you talk about this area, it was basically a colony of Russia. It was essentially a colony of Russia. So here level of economic development was low, but social development was comparatively higher. Because of, you can understand, nearness to Russia. Russia colonized these areas. Russia, if you go here, people, almost all people speak Russian. Their main language, in fact, is not English, it is Russian. So they started schools, etc., education, etc. So it was imparted to them. So the level of social development was what? It was comparatively higher. But economic development was low. So here there was higher economic and political uncertainty. In fact, after this Cold War rivalry start ho gaya, where US also began to start various coups here in this part, because it didn't want Russia to become so much strong. Okay, so we'll see later on in geopolitics that various revolutions, colored revolutions, were started here. So there was lots of economic and political uncertainty in this region, and as a result, people consciously chose to have lower fertility. Can you understand this point? Yes or no? Chose to have lower fertility levels. Then this is one thing. If you talk about the case of late expanding stage, what we find in the late expanding stage, there were two differences from first world. One, it lasted for less period of time, and population growth was slower than first world. ठीक है, एक चीज और यहां पर पहले बता दूं. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दिस फर्टिलिटी, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज सेकेंड वर्ल्ड did not experience, because it was small, only lasted for 2 to 3 decades, so it did not experience explosive population stage. Because in this stage 2, the rate of growth of population is high. Last class में समझाया था मैंने. So they didn't experience this explosive population stage. ठीक है. Late expanding में what has happened? It lasted for less period of time because fertility decline was faster. Reason here is fertility decline was faster. One, population growth was slower than the first world because we can say since they did not experience explosive population growth, what would happen with the base of population? Do you remember that in the third stage it was the base of population, base effect, which was very important? Base of population has remained smaller. ठीक है. It has remained smaller in these countries. In fact, almost all of them have, all मत लिखो, most लिखो. Most of them have completed their transition by 1980s and 90s. 1980s and 90s तक उन्होंने अपना ट्रांजिशन कंप्लीट भी कर लिया. ठीक है. सो दिस वाज द यूनिक फीचर ऑफ द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड. हियर ऑल्सो वी फाइंड दैट देयर वर डिफरेंसेस. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, first country to experience this change was Czechoslovakia. अब ये दो कंट्रियां बन गई हैं, चेक रिपब्लिक एंड स्लोवाकिया. फर्स्ट country to experience and finish the transition. Slowly it spread to the other parts of the second world. ठीक है, इतनी बात समझ में आ गई. If you talk about the third world now, third world countries. So here again we find there is variability. So this is the case of the third world. Now third world में क्या था? First, second, third and fourth. So here what we are finding, first of all, that in this case the birth rate and death rates were higher level. and this was mainly because of what? Due to very low level of socio-economic development, very low level of socio-economic development. And why it was so? It is related with the colonization and exploitation that these countries have experienced. ठीक है? So that is the first thing that was found in them. So already जो birth rate और death rate था, it was very high, 45 per thousand. Then if you talk about the early expanding stage, so here what happens? Transition began in interwar period, again inter-world war period, inter-world war period. सेम टाइम सेकेंड वर्ल्ड का भी स्टार्ट हुआ, सेम टाइम थर्ड वर्ल्ड का भी स्टार्ट हुआ. ठीक है? यू नो, फॉर एग्जांपल इंडिया का एग्जांपल दें तो यू नो, आफ्टर द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर the nationalist pressure was too much on the British, and because of that what they did, because they knew that a second world war was coming and they didn't want to lose India's, which was its most prized asset. So what they did some developmental activities also in India. So you'll be finding that this is the period where some industrialization, even some welfare activities, banking activities, all those things started during this interwar period. So that is the first thing. So transition began in the interwar period, and the beginning of the transition, which is related with the mortality decline, was a result of what? It was a result of again import of medical or health technology, import of the medical or health technology. ठीक है? That means it was not accompanied by economic and technological development. ठीक है? So it was not accompanied by economic and technological development. In these countries, economic and technological development started only after Second World War, when these countries achieved independence. ठीक है? So it was 1950s, 60s. So in the decade of 1950s, 60s, late start हुआ. Now tell me, if this is so, can I say that thus fertility decline has started very late, yes or no? Because there is always a gap, time lag between economic development and social development. Tell me. So, what has happened? Fertility decline here has arrived very late. In which period? 1980s and 1990s. As a result, tell me what will happen with the second stage. Has lasted very long. In these countries, this stage has lasted for almost 7 to 8 decades. They have continued to grow with so much high population growth rate. 7 to 8 decades. Okay. So this is the uniqueness of the second stage. Now they have entered in the third stage. In the third stage, that is late expanding. So tell me, because of being, due to being located in the second stage for long period, can I say they have accumulated very large population base, yes or no? Tell me, होगा या नहीं होगा? And this large population base is leading to what? It is leading to large absolute population gains even in the third stage when population growth rate has declined. Okay. So this is the case of these countries. Now here also we find a variety is within, and if you talk about this variety, there is a group which is referred to as developing countries and the least developed countries. Developing countries have already reached in the third stage of demographic transition, but least developed countries still remain in the second stage of demographic transition. Okay. And most of the countries which are lying here, they are sub-Saharan African countries are lying here. So they have already reached third stage. Like for example, China reached in 1980s, India 1990s में पहुंचा. First to in fact start the demographic transition within the developing countries was French Suriname. Okay, and again it was entering into the third stage in 1970s itself. ठीक है. So that is the one thing. Now this category of countries, पहले इसको बता देता हूँ. इसमें अब इसमें भी विद इन कंट्रीज में वैरायटी है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वी टॉक्ड अबाउट सूरीनाम, फर्स्ट टू एंटर both second and third stage. China, we have talked about, owing to its strict one child policy, what it has been able to do, it has been able to bypass the late second stage. So it has its own experience of demographic transition. So even within developing group there is different experience. Least developed में और भी variety आ जाता है. So very important thing least developed countries are experiencing today is, बाद में मैं इसको समझाऊंगा, I'll explain this. Suriname I think was French colony यार, और ब्रिटिश था. ओके ठीक है, मे बी सूरीनाम वॉज ब्रिटिश कॉलोनी, मुझे याद नहीं है. ओके, सो इफ यू टॉक अबाउट दिस, what they are experiencing today is what we call it as mortality reversals, a phenomena. बाद में इसको समझाऊंगा when I'll talk about mortality. So they are experiencing a phenomena referred to as mortality reversals. So where in mortality reversals what happens? Normally in demographic transition, mortality continues to decline, but due to mortality reversal, it begins to increase. It begins to increase. ठीक है. So I'll explain this phenomena later on, but mortality begins to increase. हमने क्या देखा है? There is in this case, can you see mortality continuously is declining, but in some of the countries the mortality decline has got arrested or it is even increasing. It is something like this. Tell me, if mortality, when we know very well one thing, that fertility declines only after mortality has declined to certain level. Yes or no? Tell me fast. Fertility decline begins only when mortality has declined to certain minimum level. याद है डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन में वी स्टडीड एट द एंड ऑफ द सेकेंड स्टेज इट इज रीचिंग 15 per 1000 mortality. So till it has declined to a certain lower level, minimum level, fertility decline would not start. And if the least developed countries are experiencing mortality reversal, can I say, will this phenomena lead to halt of their demographic transition? Yes or no? Will it not halt their demographic transition? Will it not a kind of, it would remain there? That means thus they would remain in the second stage for even more longer. ठीक है, and continue to experience this explosive population stage. ठीक है, very clearly बाद में देखेंगे when we'll talk about the population growth projections, we'll see that right now Africa has population something 1 billion and something it is, and it is expected 1 point something 4 or 5 ऐसे ही है, and it is expected that by the end of 21st century Africa will be the second most populated continent in the world with population of about 4 billion. So it would experience at least 3 times increase in population. Can you understand that how much already poverty and problems are there in Africa? And how much problems would be further generated if the population continues to grow like this? So when they will be reaching the third stage, it is still unknown, because it depends upon whether they are able to control this mortality reversal phenomena or not. But can we see that it seems very difficult? So much problems are arising in Africa, so much of politics, so much of civil wars, so much of the effect. In fact, Africa is going to be the most affected continent because of the climate change. So it is very difficult to predict what will be the outcome of the future population of the world, just because of we cannot predict what is going to happen in Africa. Okay, so can you see how much there is different type of demographic transitions? Yes or no? In fact, if you just want, I have given you can you see here Britain, what was the case of Britain? Can you see that how did the death rate ultimately began to decline in Britain? Can you see that actual case of, it was late 18th century, as we said before. So this is one case study first के लिए. Can you see in the case of this developed countries, Germany का कैसा है, Sweden का कैसा है? In case of the developing countries, Chile, Mauritius, China का यहाँ पर दिया हुआ है. ठीक है, here again England का with some explanations. Can you see the difference between developing and the developed? Here it is comparison which is given of Mexico and Sweden. ठीक है, कैन यू सी डेवलपिंग कहाँ पर है एंड वेयर वॉज द डेवलप्ड? Here is the demographics of China is given, and this is the demographic transition which has occurred in India. Can you see that? इंडिया में कब स्टार्ट हुआ इंटर वॉर? Yes or no? It started in the interwar period, and since then it has continued to decline. ठीक है, So you can use the slides I have given as examples and case studies, वहाँ से use कर सकते हो. ठीक है. So that is the case of, और इसमें भी कुछ कुछ लिखा हुआ है, same things, but I think I have explained more better in the class. It is, all the things are not written in this material. ठीक है. So this is the first question that was there. I will stop for today क्योंकि मेरे माउथ में I think छाले हो रखे हैं and burns are there in my mouth and I am finding it very difficult to speak. So we'll continue this tomorrow. I will suggest इसको लिखो, इस आंसर को लिखने की कोशिश करो. You'll learn a lot. Why Africa is in category of underpopulated? Because at this point Africa is underpopulated. ठीक है. So you try to write this question number 2. One more question I am giving, which will be completing tomorrow again. So there is one more question. Question number 3. There is a need to add a 5th stage in the demographic transition model. Comment. 15 marks. Need to add 5th stage in the demographic transition model. ठीक है. So you try these 2 answers. Tomorrow we'll discuss them. Good night to all of you. I'm stopping the stream now.